I didn't realize tonight was going to be a database night, but as it turns out, that's exactly what it turns out it's going to be. This is a completely unrehearsed presentation. When the organizing team asked me if I'd like to contribute, I said, of course, because we're the best bloody community, so why wouldn't you? And I didn't really have a chance to come up with a good topic, but I was reflecting on this with Lee, who I work with day to day, and we're trying to like channel our pain of day to day software development and share the pain, because there's enough people here and everyone nods because we all feel it. So, and so I came up, I was thinking multiple databases is something that we work with a lot. So I thought that's a really interesting topic. Everybody kind of has exposure to it in some various degrees. So I'll just share my experience. And then I thought, hey, multiverse of madness. Wow, multiple databases, alliteration, that works really well. There was another suggestion that Paul came up with, which was everything everywhere all at once. I thought given the Academy Awards, that would also be a good title, but I think I'm going to save that one for CDN and caching globally later on down the track. So we'll stick with Multiverse of Madness. Now, the only problem with Multiverse of Madness is I was probably more excited about getting memes and jiffies of Doctor Strange and Multiverse, right? So I thought, oh, that would be awesome, you know, typical like tech presentation. But we had so I put my kind of slide notes together, and I thought, okay, I'll convert it into a Prezzo. So I was doing that, and then we had a production issue at around kind of 1:30, 2 o'clock today, where our ordering system went completely down. So for those who don't know me, I'm the CTO of Delish. We are an online grocery. We deliver up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and I have for you guys. I don't have swag, but I have a discount code for you, Roro peeps. $20 off your first 5 orders. Roro 20. It's because I love you, and every time I'll be here, I'll always have a discount code for you. I'll clear that with marketing tomorrow. I'm not kidding. Not for tonight. It's fine. Order, get in while you can. Now. So I haven't had any chance to do any kind of multiversity stuff, and given the time constraints, I'm going to compress this right down and just talk about, just share some experience, and we'll see where we get to. I will convert this into a blog article subsequently. Now, for most developers, the first and most common use case a developer is going to encounter in Rails is typically a one-on-one relationship between the application and the database. And typically the database is Postgres, right? That's the one you will get trained on. That's the one we all have exposure to. That's all the one we love. But there are other databases out there. What I want to talk to you about, in the complex world of production environments, these days, an application is often required to manage state across multiple data sources, right? So let's try and think about what are the typical kind of database types. So when you start out, the journey is fairly simple. Oh, I've got a primary database, it's in production. I've got a replica, it's kind of read only. And replica kind of connotes that. I'd like to keep some backups of my DB, but I would also like to be able to use backups for kind of historical database, possibly. I also have like an event store these days with all the tracking that you do across an application in terms of user behavior, in terms of real-time order processing, in terms of basically real-time. You want to have like a data pool or an event lake. I don't think I'm even like scraping the surface. Any other use cases for databases while we're here? Any interesting ones? Any ones I'm missing that you use in your work environment or in your hobby environment? Memcache, very good. And why would we use Memcache?
I don't know, for caching.
Good, for caching, good. Right, we'll go with that. Good, right. Now, and the other one that's coming up big time is machine learning. right? You need tons and tons of historical data to train your models to enable machine learning as well. And then you have the fun scenarios of SQL, no SQL, right? Relational, non-relational. Has my microphone gone dead? No, I just lowered the volume because I have a loud voice. Yes, that's pretty sound. So, as I said, when you start the journey is simple, but in the modern production application, you have to have multiple databases. And you have to way of managing that inherent complexity as a developer. So it starts to get, so, it starts simple, but then it gets a little bit complicated because not only do you have that many databases, what's the other complicating factor that can anyone think of? You have multiple environments. So now you've gone from, what have we got? 5 databases to 20 databases, depending on the environments, right? And they're all going to be separate, right? I mean, you might cross over with your staging, development will probably be one database. Test you'll probably keep as a separate database, or you might roll that in. And production, you would definitely have that as a separate database. So how do we manage some of those? How do we manage that complexity? Now, this is where I was going to provide some entertainment. So let's just take a slight sideways track on that. Right. Put this into presentation mode. Right. Who can relate? Now, this is the camera's on me, the camera's not on you, but who can relate? Live editing of the database and production, yes. And those who haven't put their hand up, that just means you'll be doing it in the future. I'd like to pay my respect to the true elder when it comes to database, the OG, Lotus Notes. Someone says Lotus Notes, that's even better. And can I just say my production issues, if it weren't for extracting my from the database into an Excel file and then manually going and have a looking and identifying the issue, I would not be here today. So thank you, Excel. We bow to you in respect. Grudgingly, you are Microsoft still. Execute. Oh.
It will be done, my lord.
And I mean, like I say, I didn't realize this was going to be a database night, but thank you, Justin. Those who add indices get ahead faster in life. And this, this is my one Doctor Strange multiverse. The caption was going to be perfect data state. It's a fairy tale. It doesn't exist. And this was going to be my pun. And this is very funny. What does a database say when it's tired? I've grown query. And also, and last but not least, if anyone can actually, it's a bit like GIF and GIF, if anyone can actually tell me how to pronounce SQL. Squeal, skewl, squiggle. It's squiggle. We'll go with C. We'll go with skewl. Okay, cool. So slight sidetrack, but that's probably as meaty as the presentation is going to get tonight. So I'll just forewarn you. But I just want to let's go back to this. So I want to just talk to you about a scenario about how we would potentially navigate this multiverse. And I'm just going to bring a scenario to life that certainly I've encountered and you will probably encounter. So you very rarely have the opportunity to create a greenfields application with a brand new app with no data on it. Inevitably, you're going to be coming in as an employee into an organization, and probably there'll be some data that someone has extracted from some data source, and then it's your job to turn that data. And it doesn't matter whether you're a back-end dev or a machine learning specialist or a data scientist, whatever. You still have to know how to do kind of the basics of importing data in, cleansing it, parsing it, and making it Rails friendly. So all I'm going to talk to you about just very quickly are some common reference terms in Rails models that we use and how we can hook up an existing database to our Rails app. So the scenario is basically, I think as I've got here, and sorry, this is unrehearsed, so just bear with me because I'm doing this on the fly. We inherited a legacy database, and the legacy database is not a Postgres database, it's a MySQL database. And the tables are higgledy-piggledy, disorganized, so on and so forth. So I just want to talk you through some of the scenarios that I've encountered. The first scenario I encountered, let's see if I've got this. Yes. Right. So the first scenario I encounter is where the primary key is not the ID column. So who can I just show of hands, who hasn't encountered a primary key that's not an ID? So this is your first time exposure to primary key, not an ID? Yes. If you haven't encountered it, please try and avoid it as much as you can. The great thing about Rails is it does allow you to actually set manually, you could connect your table. So we have here what is effectively the customer table, but you can look online too. The primary key that's been defined is not the ID column. It's a separate column, which is actually a string column. It's the customer ID column. The customer has many orders. That's fairly common. So we would expect in the orders table, what would we expect on the orders table there to a column to be existing? If the customer table has many orders, and I'll just as a sidetrack, this might help. Yes, I did this while Justin was preparing. I thought so. Has many and belongs to go hand in hand, and the way you want to think about it is the table, in this case, the customer table, that's where the primary key sits. So if I'm the belongs to table, in this case, orders, customer has many orders, on the orders table, I'm going to have a column which is referring to the primary key, which is the customer ID. And on the customer table, well, I don't need to talk about, I don't need to have a reference to the orders table, but what I do need to have in Rails is a reference to the foreign key. So order, if you don't specify it, then automatically you're going to assume that on the orders table, there is a reference to customer ID. But on the customer having many items, so order have many items, customer has many items, here we've had to manually set the foreign key. On the items model, you can see here we have to actually specify the reverse. So the belongs to table, i.e. the child table, is looking at the parent table and saying that, hey, the customer ID, because the primary key on the other table is not the ID column, right? It's the customer ID. Right? So it is different. Make sense? Yep. Now, the only other thing I wanted to mention, because I haven't had a huge amount of time, is a couple of things here, and these are pretty key. So when you're organizing a database to be incorporated into your application, you want to make sure that you are defining a separate class that is inheriting. So basically, this is the abstract class. So you want to define one abstract class per database. So if I've got 3 databases, I expect to have 3 abstract classes. And in this case, it's the backups record, which references the backups table. If I want to be extra explicit, so Rails tries to do some funky stuff. From the backups record name, what table do you think it's going to be looking at? What database? backups database, right? So if your database is not explicitly the backups database, you're going to have to define it very specifically here. And the other one, which is an entire topic in itself, is basically reading and writing. So in this case, we're reading from primary production and writing to backups production. This is a very typical kind of backup model that you would use. And then what you would do is you would just make sure you have like a after action on any change you make to the database to basically trigger a callback, which will then write to the backups record. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is about as far as I got when I ran out of time this afternoon. So I'm going to show you again. And thank you very much for your time. And I'll just reference that's my cute nephew. So thanks. And more than you thanks, please support teachers because they deserve a pay rise. Connect me with LinkedIn.